talking. So like, that's why I say unmute yourselves, talk, answer questions, give comments. This program is it's very special to me, actually, because you know, and it has taken on more significance, as I have shared with many. Yet when I first I've been in the field for over 35 years. And I have often told people that the first patient that I ever had with Alzheimer's disease was 39 years old. It was mind blowing. And back then we really didn't understand what it was all about. And we thought it was this rare disease. So I used to, you know, that affected people in their early 40s. And now we know very differently, although we still don't know enough. So, you know, what I used to do is you know, obviously, you know, we have a lot of programs focused on the individual, and we should. But, you know, it also always haunted me. You know, I kind of think of programs sometimes as I'm drifting off to sleep at night, and just some of the topics that had come up. And certainly in my clinical career as a medical social worker, I kept thinking, boy, the families are affected in such unique ways with this particular disease, you know, than other serious illness or advanced diseases. There are unique challenges that they're facing here. So I just kept thinking about it. So that's when I put this program together about helping families through dementia, what professionals need to know. Because I do like to distinguish between it. I am not minimizing any other terminal illness or advanced illness or serious illness by focusing on this at all. I don't want you to think that, but I do think that there are unique challenges that we face. So fast forward it. And then, so this takes on a different meaning for me, even more so because my own mother has Alzheimer's disease. And I see these challenges, I live these challenges every day. And I'll tell you, it's very different, even after teaching this and counseling people for over 35 years, to be living this, it's so different. And I could practically kick myself almost every single day at the things that and I know what to say, I know what to do, and I just can't do it. You know, it's so hard to change the way we relate to these people that we love and not expect that we can interact and to say things in the way that we used to do. And so we're going to talk about all of that in this today. So I sent out an email to all of you on with the evaluation. So I do have contact hours and CEUs for nursing, social work, certified case managers, and certificates of attendance for everybody else. I need you to, after we're done with the program, I want you to, and I set the evaluation up, you can just click on it. And then send it back to me. So I set it up with in electronic fashion that you can send it back. And then I'm going to send you your certificates. So, and if you can do that quickly, some people are sending me things months later and it just doesn't work. I have to process this information and have it available with the disciplines that we're submitting through. So let me know. And on the evaluation, because we are able to offer CEUs, there are 2 yes or no questions on the eval, and they're asking, did I say this information? They're called attestation slides or conflict of interest information. There's no conflict of interest for this program. There's no commercial support. I'm doing this for education. And in this particular program, there's no off-label med use, alrighty, that you can often find in hospice care. So like I said, those questions are yes and yes because it's asking, did I tell you that? Alrighty? All right, so let's get into this. And like I said, just jump in. Don't worry about interrupting. And like I said, I can't see the chat right now, so you're going to have to let me know, Jim, if things are coming in through that, okay? All right, so by the time we're done with this, and I promise you I will promptly end at 1 o'clock, we're going to talk about ways that families are impacted by having a loved one with dementia. I have 3 ways here. You're going to learn a lot of different ways. The list is endless, to tell you the truth, and I'm going to talk a lot about those today. We're going to talk about some suggestions to help with caring. We need all the support. This is a disease where it takes a village. It does. And, you know, and you've heard me in other programs, and I feel so strongly about this. When you or your loved one has been diagnosed with a serious illness or a life-limiting illness, one of the first things you need to do is you need to get your peeps. You need to build your team. And it really is important. And I'll tell you, there's so many people on this team that you need to have. And I am so grateful every day of my life for all of the people that have stepped up and have helped me and are I really feel that are lifting me through this journey, because I don't know how I could ever do this alone. It's so heart-wrenching. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about resources that are available. Sometimes people think there's nothing out there to help. There are things out there. Is it ever enough? No, of course it's not ever enough, right? So my hope and my dream is that, again, there'll be more and more and more resources for individuals and families with a loved one with Alzheimer's or other dementia as we go along. But it just, you know, that it doesn't always happen that way. But boy, I'll tell you, I'm extremely grateful to all of you, because I know we have people on from various organizations that do a ton of work with people and the families around this disease. And I'm very grateful to all of you. And we'll talk about those resources at the end. So, you know, we're talking about caregiving today, right? And when I'm talking about caregiving today, I'm not talking about the professional caregiver, what they're going through. That's a whole other issue. And I also want to say too, and we can certainly talk about this a little bit today, you know, obviously the COVID pandemic has put a whole new tilt on this, a whole different tilt. And we can bring that up throughout this. For those of you who aren't aware, if you weren't on the other program, I just put out another program on the impact of COVID-19 on individuals and families living with Alzheimer's and related dementias. So I really focus in on that with that program, but you feel free. We can certainly talk about that. I don't want it to be the elephant in the living room that we tiptoe around. It's certainly there, and it certainly has added a whole new dimension here. But when we're talking today, we're talking about caregivers that are informal, unpaid, and that are caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or related dementia. Just some facts. What do you think? How many unpaid caregivers, and I'm talking about just in this country in a year's time, how many unpaid caregivers do you think there are in this country right now, caring for an individual with Alzheimer's or related dementia? What do you think?
70%?
Well, I'm going
Millions.
in millions. So you look at these questions that I'm asking. I'm going to flip this screen so I'm going to show you. I think this is going to really floor you. I have to tell you, how many hours of unpaid care, what's the unpaid care valued at? And let me ask you this last question before I flip this screen and show you these numbers. What percentage of the caregivers are female?
More than half.
80%.
70?
That's the very good guesses, because it was 75%. That's what it was. Those numbers have come down a bit, believe it or not. I want you to know, so 2/3 of the individuals who have Alzheimer's are female. You know, women, and part of that is women live longer, right? Women are usually the caregivers. The caregivers are their daughters and granddaughters, generally. Middle age, working, caring for their children, right? That's really the typical profile of that caregiver. But check these numbers out. There's over 16 million caregivers. That's in this country right now. Can you imagine? Unpaid. 18.5 billion hours of unpaid care. Is that amazing? 234 billion. That number by mid-century will jump to $1 trillion. This is a huge issue. And more than 66% of the caregivers are female. Do any of those numbers kind of like shock you more than others? Which one in particular? Or do they all?
Yeah.
Say it again.
I think the unpaid caregivers, 16 million. That's amazing, Mary.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's just mind-blowing, because we know right now, right, 5.8 million individuals have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in this country. Those are just the ones that have been diagnosed, and that's going to go to 16 million. This is a huge issue. And that's because of the baby boomers, right? So increased age is that increased risk factor, but it's not a normal part of aging. So, but this is what I'm going to tell you, this really does have an impact. You've heard the expression, if you've met one individual with Alzheimer's, you've met one individual with Alzheimer's. It's the same thing for families. Don't cookie cutter this, because everybody is unique in terms of how they're affected by this. And I'll tell you, it really is the same for the family. Every family is different. So if you've met one family with this, they're going through their own unique set of things. So really, really gear your plan of care with them to make it very unique. So I always like to look at this. Listen, this is a hard situation. This really is, it's heart-wrenching, it's draining, I'm going to tell you. But there's always a positive aspect to everything, I truly believe. Even in the worst things or the biggest heartache that I have ever held in my life, I've always found something that came from it for some strange reason that was able to be a positive thing. What possibly could be the positive aspects of caring for somebody with Alzheimer's or other dementia?
Also relationships.
Yeah, excellent. And yeah, absolutely.
Stability.
Say it again.
Stability.
Yeah, that continuity and all of that, Lana. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. What else?
I mean, a sense of being needed or being, helping.
Yeah. Boy, Mary, isn't it true? Knowing that you've made an impact, particularly, I think in general, feel like you've made an impact on somebody else's life, but also knowing that you're impacting somebody that you love, it absolutely plays a part in this. What else? You guys did great. It's truly an expression of love, right? This reciprocity we do for each other, right? That's what we do. We help people, we help each other through the good times and the rough times. I want to talk about reciprocity, though, under the challenges, too. All right. So it's interesting because that really falls into that. Sometimes we don't even know what we can do until we're faced with it. Right. And it's amazing. When we're growing up and all, we're not getting a crash course. And if my loved one has Alzheimer's, if they have a CVA, if they have a high, cancer, whatever it is, we're not getting we're not kind of having this course that kind of gears us and prepares us for this, right? And like I said, even when we have knowledge around it, it doesn't prepare us for this. So it's amazing how people can rise to the occasion, and it's really a satisfying feeling knowing that that you're able to do this. There's that dignity too, right? Knowing that you're helping. And this is something that's interesting, and I'm finding this especially interesting. I have, my mother has had Alzheimer's now for several years, and it's just marching on. And what I have found is that I have been a fierce advocate for her dignity, just fierce around it. What I am finding lately, and I'll tell you, it's a very eye-opening situation because she is in a facility now, and they're wonderful to her. They're just wonderful. I can't say more about the care that she's receiving. But, my mother was somebody who was just, she wouldn't leave the house without having a shower. I mean, she just dressed impeccably. The whole, her appearance was very important to her, and all of that. And so I kind of followed her lead on this. So it's like, I make sure that the showers and what she has on, and I'm even doing this behind, from the window at this point, right? Because I can see her through the window, and it's amazing. And what I'm finding now that my fierceness around advocacy around her, what I consider to be her dignity around her personal care, I think I'm adding to her stress. This is like a gestalt. I know it's that I've just had. I have to tell you, and I feel like I've really had to do some introspective work on this for the past couple of weeks, because I'm finding that by pushing so far to have this is something that is not comfortable for her anymore, that she struggles around it. She does not want to have a shower every day. She does not want to have her. And in my fight to kind of keep on what she used to do, see, but that's the key, isn't it? What she used to do. It's not what is right for her now, but it's hard for me to let go of the what was in order to, to be with the what is for her. So it's me that has to work around this. So I'm really backing off. And I actually said to the one of the aides the other day, because my mother said, I don't want my hair washed. I want my hair. And I said, and she looks, because they say Mary wants you to, because she does everything I ask, which I don't want it done for that reason. Right? So I said to them, when she refuses, honor her wish. And I got to tell you, that takes a lot because it's the dignity issue for me. But at what cost, right? So I feel like we have to kind of really look at this total picture. Carrying out, how about if it's a spouse situation, right? It's that commitment that you make to one another, for better or for worse, through sickness and in health. And so there's some positive aspects. Let's talk about the struggles. What are some of the many struggles? What is unique for people with families that are faced with Alzheimer's and dementia? What are some of the distinctions? There's a list a mile long. What do you think?
Overwhelming amount of emotions that the families don't have time to even process themselves.
Yeah, yes. And isn't that the truth, Janelle, huh? So you're so busy trying to do all of the logistical or concrete stuff, you don't even have time to process your grief and the feelings around it. And boy,
usually comes out in bad ways then.
That does, doesn't it? And I always say, when you see challenging behavior, just try to be understanding and pause for a minute, because generally at the root of challenging behavior, generally, is fear, helplessness, and grief. Those are generally what drives it. So if we can understand what's at the root of it, we can be more compassionate around it, right? And it's hard, though. It's hard when you have that, but you're absolutely right. What other things do you see?
So much guilt.
Yeah. Oh, boy, isn't that true? And, guilt is an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? Because I'm going to tell you, guilt can eat you alive, can it? I mean, there's positive guilt and there's negative guilt, right?
You're always wondering, if you're not doing enough, if you're doing, just always.
Yeah, and we are hardwired for it. We're hardwired for it. So we, no matter, we could cough up a lung and it's not going to be enough, right? It's just how it is. It's just no matter what we do, and we do a lot of work with families around this, right? Because no matter what you do, you're always going to find something that you should have done this, you should have done that, you could have been better, you could have done more. And it's just, and really we have to look at this from a realistic standpoint. So, the other part, so we're hardwired for guilt, so we have to lay off and try to be gentle with ourselves. The other piece about guilt is, listen, there's different types of guilt. There's a positive guilt, right? So if I feel guilty because I didn't go to the gym today, maybe I'll go tomorrow. I said maybe. No, so so guilt can be a motivating force, right? Now, there's also the kind of guilt, like I said, that can chew us up and spit us out. That negative guilt that's just never enough, that's the stuff we got to work on. How about the good guilt again, in terms of, geez, if I'm not especially patient with my mother today, or maybe I wish I had reacted in a certain way, if I feel guilty about the way I react and I should have done it differently, that could motivate me to change the way I respond the next time. That's good guilt, right? So we just have to keep an eye on it. What are the things? Excellent comments, you guys. What else?
Just actual time, how to find the time to do everything you need to do.
Oh, Lindsay, yeah, I'm going to tell you, amen. Listen, there are not enough hours in the day, are there? Like I said, it takes a village. It takes a village. So, for those of you who have not read the 36-hour day, I hope you will, because it's all consuming, and, in addition to time, caregivers, it's not uncommon that they have health issues, right? Because they're not doing the things they don't even have time, but they're also not doing things that they need to do to care for themselves. They're doing everything to focus on that person. So, caregiving is great until it's at your own expense, right? And again, it's good to give to the people that you love, but not in terms of sacrificing yourself in terms of your own demise. The other thing I always say is that, we feel the best caregiver we are is the more we do for other people. The counterintuitive part is the better care I take of myself, the better I am for my mother. Right? We have to kind of make sure that we focus. But there's that guilt again, huh, Michelle? Is that we feel guilty because, oh my gosh, I'm going to do something fun. oh my gosh, and not, oh geez, well, they can't go out, they can't do this. So I mean, there's you name it, we can find stuff to feel guilty about. What else?
I think learning to negotiate with family members on the way that they approach things. You have to sort of, if you tend to be a control freak, you sort of have to reboot.
Yeah.
Things
Yes.
like that.
Excellent, Alana. Yeah. I'm going to go into a piece on this of family dynamics, and I want to cover just what you're talking about and a bunch more. This does. I always said, like, it's interesting to watch families and how they interact, and certainly when you have an illness of any kind in a family, it can, or a crisis in a family, it can pull the family together or it can pull it apart, right? And I always say, listen, all families are fractured, right? They are. Think about it. Even our own, there's no such thing as the perfect family. We all have fractures. Some have hairline fractures and others have fractures the size of the Grand Canyon, right? So what we can see is that it can go one way or another, right? But that there's always that baggage, right? That people kind of pull along with them in this, right? So I once had a person who I used to do a lot of work with, years ago in the field. And we would talk about it and say, listen, we all have our baggage, but the goal is that we can't get rid of it necessarily, but we want to whittle it down to a carry-on, so that should be really our goal in life, right? So other things for struggles that you see.
The grief over losing the person and watching them lose each step of the way.
Oh, Masha, I got to tell you, I think this is one of the biggest things, right? And it's the grief is so pronounced that it's almost, some days it feels like it just is tripping you every step of the way. Mm-hmm. It really does. It's just so pronounced. And it's called the ambiguous loss. When you lose the person mentally and socially, but yet they're physically right there, to remind you every day of the loss. It's so pronounced. So that's the hard part, is that, and like I said, part of that, the dignity, it's the loss. I think that's how, we have a hard time changing the script. That's why we kind of interact with the person the way we used to, right? Because we don't want to see the person differently from what they are. And we have a hard time changing the script sometimes. I think a component of that is grief too, right? We just don't want to admit or see that the person is different to us. We want them. We want to be able to run to them and tell them this and tell them that. It doesn't work that way. So there's so many different, you're grieving not just for what is, but the what will be, what won't be. There's so many layers to that onion in terms of what you're grieving. I had a family member, I do a lot of work with community groups, and I had a family member say to me, I just want him to put out the garbage. She was grieving the loss of the role, right, with her husband. And it wasn't that she was lazy, it was that she missed their not having this distribution of chores, right? The way their relationship had already, it worked, it very complemented one another. She missed that. She missed it. When you think about it on a level, like, for a spouse or what have you too, I mean, you're not just, you've lost certainly your spouse of who they are at this point or who they were, but also, it's your dinner companion, your lover, your best friend, your dance partner, you name it, right? It's like this person who you probably have shared your most, who knows you the best of anybody in the world, right? And you lose those things too. You lose those things. So, and it's different on so many different levels depending on the relationship. Other things in terms of struggles. You guys did so good.
After dealing with all the billing issues related to the illnesses.
Yeah, so financial? Is that what you said, Alana? Yeah.
Just all the medical, the medical pharmacy, all the billing issues, all the, taking over all that.
It's huge, yeah. Well, basically, you really are, right? I mean, it's already a task to just keep up with your own, organization and bill keeping and all that, and then to take on, you really feel like you've taken on that other person's life in that way. Certainly, I certainly feel that, although I don't begrudge it. It's just, you feel it. The other piece I want to just mention in that comment too is that on an average, I gave you those statistics in the beginning of this, on an average, a family member puts at least $5,000 out of their own pocket each year when they're caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's and dementia. And you know what? You can think 5,000 is not a lot. 5,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And particularly now, right? People are really feeling that too. So that's another piece to it. Yeah. Other things?
Dealing with siblings who live far away and try to tell you how to care for that person.
Yes. Oh, don't you love that? Okay, so hold that. I love Janelle's expression. Yes, hit the nail on the head, didn't you, Janice? Okay. What we're going to do
Goes
is
along with that guilt.
Yeah. But that's where, and hold on to that thought, Janice, because I want to talk about this, what you guys have brought up around these family dynamics. And that I bring up too. So hold on to that. Yes, I always love the people that are calling the shots long distance. And listen, long distance caregiving has its own whole host of other challenges and issues too. So I do feel badly in one sense for them, but it's not a time to stop pointing the finger, right? And to start kind of barking orders from a distance when the person here is kind of picking up, doing the grunt work, right? So, and I always love when that person kind of comes in once a year, on the white horse. That's always helpful too, right? And all is well in the world. And then they point out everything that's not going right, and then they're out of town again in a second. Those dynamics absolutely happen, and I'm going to talk more about those in a few minutes. That's excellent. What else for struggles?
And Mary, just being in a constant stress level. It's a constant state of stress.
Yeah. And you know what? You're right, Trish, because you don't really ever feel at ease, I mean, and again, people think, oh, geez, well, you're lucky maybe because, your mother is getting some care from other people. They're in a facility. And I tell you, it doesn't work that way. Hold on 1 second for me. I'm just looking at, I just got a notice about a chat. Yes. Somebody's relative calls the brother the second coming. Yes. If you have a loved one that's in a facility, your caregiving role doesn't stop there. It's still a very, and I like people in facilities to understand that although again, you need that village and you need that support. And again, I thank God for it every day, but it doesn't take the weight and the pressure and the guilt and the stress and all of that off the family. It does in one component, but it doesn't in a lot of other ways. So you're still a caregiver. And I used to tell families that, it said, because they thought, oh, I'm relinquishing my caregiver role, my loved one. And I also see for families, the staff thinks, oh, aren't you relieved? Oh, you should be feeling good now. You're relieved. That's generally not how families feel. Families generally then feel even guilty about that because they feel like you're doing something that I wasn't able to do. The other thing, and I had a family member, and this woman took care of her husband at home for like 5 years. She did it really single-handedly. And listen, most of the time when you're a spouse like that, and most people are older who have Alzheimer's, they're older too. It's right. I mean, it's different when it's your child, even the adult child doing that, and they can be older too. But you see what I mean? So generally it's that spouse who's older with this kind of stress on them as well. And I said to her, listen, she felt like, geez, look they can do what I can't. And it's like, no. They have 3 shifts of people here with multiple people on each shift. You did yeoman's work here and you enabled your husband to be at home for that period of time. And now a loving gesture that you're doing is making sure that as his care transitions, that he's getting the extended care that he needs. So we really got to help because there's that guilt again. There's the guilt. So that keeps coming up into the conversation, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to go through some. You guys did great and keep jumping in and calling things out. Listen, this is hard work. This really is. Part of the distinction from this, listen, people can have a terminal illness And, you know, it's a kind of a shorter period of time sometimes. If somebody has a terminal illness that is rapidly progressing and all of that. How many, and Alzheimer's is a terminal illness. People will die from Alzheimer's, and people say, oh, they don't die from Alzheimer's, they die from a secondary infection. Well, that's true that people can die from a secondary infection, but that you can say that of any illness, right? Anybody can at any time can die from a secondary illness or a secondary infection. So you will die from Alzheimer's, again, if you don't have a secondary type of infection. It's the length of time. This is called an endurance race of the long goodbye for a reason. An average life expectancy for somebody with Alzheimer's is 8 to 10 years. That's average. It can range from 5 to 20. Yikes. Can you imagine that? Again, that is a long period of time. When I was saying I get asked to speak to community groups, and I was asked, this was sometime a few years ago, not a few, a couple maybe, that I was asked to come and speak to this group. And they were all spouses with a loved one with Alzheimer's disease. There were 10 of them in the group. So I went out, I spoke to that group, and they asked me to come back 3 months later as a guest speaker, and 3 of the healthy spouses had died. Yeah, I'm going to tell you, it takes a toll. So it's people are at risk for their own health issues, because you know what? They're not going to the doctor. They're not getting checkups. They're not exercising. They're not eating well. They're not sleeping right. Wow, this is a big issue, right? Their immune systems are suppressed, and they are opening themselves up to illness here. So that's a big deal. Social isolation is another one. You know, and I'm going to tell you, people socially isolate for a number of different reasons. What are they? What are some of the reasons people socially isolate?
Fatigue in general. Yeah.
Perform things that they used to.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
I said they get embarrassed because they can't perform some of the things they used to.
Right. And so even for the family, sometimes there's a level of shame or embarrassment, right? So it's like, ooh, let's not get them out in public here, you know, because of behaviors and all of that. Janelle, what did you say? Thank you. That was a great response. What were you saying?
I said depression.
Yeah, depression is a bit, listen, and depression goes undetected. It goes undiagnosed, right? You know, the statistics I have heard is 50% of people with Alzheimer's have a diagnosable depression. How about the depression in the family members, right? So these things are going unnoticed too. And that can't be overlooked. And depression in older adults, I feel, is really underdiagnosed and overlooked, isn't it? And even more today. And let's not tiptoe around COVID, because I am worried about people's emotional and mental health during this time, and the heightened isolation and all of those things. So we have to pay a special attention to people's mental and emotional health here. So yeah, people, I had a woman who, her husband had Alzheimer's, and they loved going out, and she loved taking him out still, but he had some behaviors. So they would go to department stores, they would go to restaurants, and he would have behaviors. And then, you know, the people that were working there would roll their eyes, you know, with impatience towards him and such. And the wife would actually, she had an index card in her pocketbook, and she'd open her pocketbook and take it out. And it said on it, "Please be kind and understanding with my husband. He has Alzheimer's disease." I really applaud her. It takes a lot of courage, and they still wanted to do. I remember early on in the process, when I would take my mother out to restaurants, she always hugged the waiters and waitresses. Now, you know, fortunately, she's very sweet and cute, so people didn't take offense to it. But, you know, you could get somebody who kind of had an issue with it, but fortunately, we never ran into that. But I'll tell you, you never know, you know, what people are going to do. So the social isolations around all of them, part of the social isolation is too that, listen, you know, where people go by the wayside, right? You really find out who your support network is now and who's going to hang around, right? Because a lot of times it's that one person left holding the bag. And then, like I said, I'll bring that up more in the family dynamic piece that I'm going to be talking about. But that's a part of social isolation too. And you know what? Here's another piece. So when do families decide to come visit? Oh, well, after work is good, right? For them, it's good for them. So I think we'll go visit after work at around 5 o'clock. Well, what happens around 5 o'clock? Sundowning. So it's at the peak of somebody's behavior. So again, now you have a lot of commotion and noise and agitation, and this is when people are visiting. Well, that's the time it works for me, though. Well, sorry, the disease isn't going to accommodate you, right? And that's the reality of it, is that the disease does not accommodate us. We have to accommodate it. So we might have to take time off from work and go at a different time, which better suits the individual. Because there are, you see, there's so many reasons for this social isolation and the sleep deprivation, which I had mentioned. Listen, people, they don't get enough sleep, because what does the caregiver do when the individual finally is sleeping?
Oh, their errands, housework.
That's
children.
exactly right. Errands, laundry, dishes, anything they can't do when the patient or the person is awake, right? What they should be doing is sleeping. Right? And because, again, sleep deprivation is huge. Caregiver burnout is so prevalent. We got to pay attention to it. Here's another unique thing. When people have a terminal illness, you see the changes, right? You start to see those physical decline, the physical changes in that person. A person can go along with Alzheimer's and they can look the same for a very long time. And another piece to this too is, and I had a woman whose husband had Alzheimer's, and he didn't look differently to her. And then he had moments of lucidity, right? Where all of a sudden, he could remember something she couldn't. But then 2 minutes later, he's talking ragtime. So of course, when he had his moments of lucidity, the wife would get very furious with him because she thought, this is in his control. He's kind of doing this. He's putting this on. And she would get highly frustrated with him. So that presents a whole different issue too, because people think the person is able to do more than they're really able to do. They don't see the changes in them in that way. And that gets complicated. The personality changes. So, I had this family that I was working with, this was several years back, and the woman was in her 90s. She was very sweet. And now all of a sudden in her Alzheimer's process, man, she was just like banging out the F-bomb and just, holy mackerel. She said some real colorful things. And then the son was saying that he came up to me one day and he looked so despondent and he said, she's been holding this in for years. She's been wanting to tell us where to go and how to get there for years. It's like, no, she hasn't. I said, actually, this is disease process. If she was on the outside looking in, she'd be mortified. She'd be absolutely mortified. So that's really what is going on. So but people think, and here's the other one. So you can go from being sweet and then going that route. Here's another complication. How about the people that were not Mr. or Miss Congeniality in their day, and now all of a sudden is like sweet and accommodating and all of that? And I would when I worked in facilities, I would warn the staff. I'd say, because they'd go up to the family, "Oh, your father's the sweetest thing in the world." And the family's sitting there like, I'm glad you're getting the best of him, because he was a real bee when we were growing up, right? So you can see how there's a lot of resentment there, isn't there? So you can see how complicated this gets. So these personality changes are very hard for the families. You need to communicate. The way that people with Alzheimer's communicate is with behaviors. So we have to learn to communicate with them differently. This isn't why you do it for your family member, but boy, it's nice to get that. Geez, thanks. I'm so grateful. I appreciate your care, all of this stuff. It doesn't happen. This disease, you get very narrow. A person can't think outside themselves in that way. So you have to, again, you can't look for that level of appreciation. And again, it's not why you do it, but boy, it's always nice. But you're not going to get it here. here's that reciprocal relationship. Like I said, you just, like I said, this woman who said to me, I just want him to put the garbage out. It's just very nice having this, reciprocity that you're not going to find with this depression, which we talked about, definitely overlooked. Grief and mourning, which Marsha brought up, which is so, so important here. Here's the other thing, and we do this a lot in our end of life work, is that, we have opportunities to make amends, to reconcile, right? Finish unfinished business. You can't do it here, So it's, what I also find too in this process is that, even if you have a good relationship, and I have a wonderful relationship with my mother, and I always have, but I have to tell you, there have been certain things as a part of her personality that always got under my skin, that like with anybody, right? So, and she and I kind of joked and talked about that throughout our lives. Well, it feels like it gets more pronounced during this process. And it's hard because some of the agitation that you feel, and you can even assign it to dementia process, but it's when the personality things had been really prior to that, it's hard to give them a mulligan or a pass on it, right? Because those things can start to get stirred up too. Even post caregiving, I had a friend whose spouse died of Alzheimer's disease several years ago, and she said to me, I don't even know what to do with myself anymore. I forgot who I was. Wow, I thought that was so profound, because I do think that happens a lot, is that you get so entrenched in this caregiving role that you almost lose a part of yourself. And you kind of forget, like, what are the things that drive you? What are your passions? And I think people have a hard time pursuing those because they're so focused on this caregiving. I think you have to do things simultaneously. You got to follow your passion, but also at the same time, you can care for that person. But I don't think that, some people say, well, I'll do that later. Don't do that, because sometimes later doesn't come, right? So I think we have to follow those simultaneously so that we can get renewed and refreshed in order to be able to maintain this role over the long haul. The holidays, we want them to be the same, don't we? Boy, we do. We want them the same. We love tradition and ritual. And sometimes, you know what? We don't even budge. We don't even budge, right? We're going to do it. No, we're doing that. We're having that meal. This is what happened with us last year. Nope, the meal's at 5:00. We got 30 people at my niece's house, and my mother's sitting there very agitated asking, what are we doing here? And I said, well, this is Thanksgiving. We're eating a Thanksgiving dinner. And she was like, well, I've never been here before. She's been at my niece's house many a time. So it was like, shame on me, shame on us. This isn't happening again. And again, I kind of got pressured from my family because I had originally said no, but it boils down to, you know what, shame on me. Because, it didn't happen at Christmas. So, this is where the advocacy comes into, that you got to stand up, because it's not right, but yet, you let people talk you into things sometimes, but we have to make changes. We have to change rituals. Maybe like 2 people have dinner with the person, and it doesn't even have to be on that day. It just doesn't. It can be at other times. You got to work it to them, what works for them. There's that sundowning, right? Let's pay attention to it. And listen, sundowning is an interesting phenomenon. When the sun goes down, agitation increases. We see the predominant, really behaviors predominantly at this time. Part of it has to do with the light changing. Part of it has to do, there's chemical changes in the body, right? That's not fully understood. Part of the reason too is because by the end of the day, the person's exhausted. This is a chore to live with this disease. And as a caregiver, you're exhausted. Well, isn't that that doesn't work well, right? You got the caregiver exhaustion, you got the person exhaustion, and then, heads are butting all over the place with that. So pay attention to the sundowning and don't do things that are going to trigger it, make things worse. The stigma. I had a family member come down. I was working with a group, and the daughter came down and she said, I never told anybody about my father's Alzheimer's disease because I thought people would think he was stupid. Oh, it was so sad for me to hear that. that, people sometimes don't talk about it because they think that people are going to think their loved one is mentally ill. First of all, this is a medical disease, as is mental illness, right? It's a medical disease. There's nothing to be ashamed of here. There's nothing to be ashamed about. This is a medical disease. This is not within that person's control. And again, we have to destigmatize this. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do. But I think, again, more information is coming out. Because it affects cognition, people think of it as a mental illness. No, this is an illness that it does affect cognition and our brains, but it affects all aspects of our body. It shuts all of our systems down. So this is a tough disease. The behaviors which we talked about, and those can be challenging, and people vary in terms of those behaviors. There's that role change that I've talked about. So let's get into these family stressors. You guys brought it. So here are some of the highlights, and we'll take these apart each one. So criticism, denial, a disagreement, favoritism, lack of family help, relationship strain. Wow, these sound familiar, don't they? So there's that criticism, right? Here it is, the finger pointing, second guessing. And I always say, look, when the finger is the person who's pointing the finger, usually it needs to be turned back on them, because there's a lot of, they're probably feeling like they're not doing enough, whether they're conscious of it or not. It's usually because they're coming up short. So it could be because of regret. It could be because of other things. But you want to stay away from the finger pointing. And then these are the people, again, that come in that once a year, and they all the problems but no solutions. It's amazing how family dynamics work. I have a brother who lives in Florida, and I have two brothers. They're wonderful men. But I really carry the brunt of my mother's care, and they do what they can. But this brother in Florida, really, he doesn't do anything. But he is the golden boy. So it's amazing how, so when he comes in once every year or so, I said to my mother when she was better than she is now, I said, Matthew's coming in, and oh my gosh, I said, good news, your golden boy is coming in. Oh, he's not my favorite. No, it's just because he's the youngest. I said, Mom, I'm the youngest. Isn't it funny? It doesn't matter how old we get. Man, do we play out that stuff like with the parent and the approval? It's like, it doesn't. I've seen 70-year-olds at the parent's bedside still seeking approval. It's like, are you kidding me? So one of the staff had asked me, how will we know when your brother's here? I said, you can't miss it. Okay. There'll be a bright light that's like following him down the hallway. And of course, and my mother was a little bit better then. So she laughs with me about this, so we joke about it. I can't do it now because she really doesn't capable of doing it now, but we had a lot of fun with it. We kind of joked it off, but it's hard. And there's always that, there's even denial around it, right? We don't want to face it. We don't want to know that, or come to terms with the fact that this is our loved one's situation, or this is ours even. So people make it, oh no, Mom's just overwhelmed. Well, no, Mom's not overwhelmed. Mom has a significant illness here, right? And I think sometimes why the denial is so thick for people is, geez, if I admit that Mom has it, does that mean I'm going to get it? So sometimes it's almost a little close to comfort for people, right? Where they worry about this, like, oh my gosh, what does this mean for me? So there's a lot of that self-denial too. The disagreements, even, a lot of, you brought this up, like even paying for care. I always I cringe, and again, when I was doing direct patient care for so many years as a medical social worker, it's like, I'll make my daughter the healthcare proxy and my son the durable power of attorney. So, which is a nightmare, right? So, okay, so now Mom needs to go have care. So let's get Mom settled in a facility. Well, you can put her in the facility, but I'm not paying for it because I think you can take care of her. Oh my gosh, if you had a nickel for every time that scenario played out, wouldn't you be a multimillionaire, right? So even you're always going to have the favorites, right? And I'm going to tell you, I hear this from families, no matter how you're always Mom's favorite. Mom always liked you best, and there's somebody had mentioned the golden boy, the this and that, the second coming, as you mentioned. It's the swoop-in superhero, the halo effect. I always love the people that, people say, you don't have to do this alone. And I'll say, good. Okay, so tell me what you're going to do to help me. I always do it the other way, because some families, they never feel like what the other person is good enough. And I have family members that resist letting other family members help because they feel like they don't do it as well. Well, you know what? Just do it good enough, because people need to help. And I think sometimes, people do, they take on this halo effect. And listen, you know what? It's not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to run you down. I see too, I was watching this, there's these 3 children of a woman that was in her 90s. They were in their 70s, by the way. Okay. This was when I was doing direct patient care, and they were bickering with each other, and they were bringing up issues from like their adolescence. Well, do you remember when you did that? It was like, really? This is the time to be stirring up this stuff about what happened in adolescence? It's amazing what happens with these dynamics. And the sibling Olympics are, that I can do it better than you, sort of a thing. So everybody, this challenge of this competition almost, we got to get out of that, right? I always love the people too. Let me know if I can help. Now, it's really just a statement, right? And so that's, they're really, what are they doing? They're not taking action. So that's why I always say, oh, good. So give me specifics. Like, what can you do? Because I'm not ashamed to take help at this point from family or what have you. But those family members too, out of sight, out of mind. Let me go back for a second. I'm sorry. Out of sight, out of mind. They might call to see how the person's doing, but they never ask you how you're doing. So I always love the people too. It's not my thing. I have a hard time seeing mom like this. I'm having a picnic. But it's amazing how people can really almost disassociate themselves, like they're not even getting it. Like, this is what you live every day. Listen, I don't think it's ill-intended at all. It's just amazing about human behavior and how people can, almost compartmentalize in a way and get themselves into this. Relationship strains too. You see this, right? Because a lot of times it's affecting the sandwich generation. So you're really being pulled. And like I said, Julie, you do find out who your support networks are. 80% of caregivers report that caregivers strange their marriage or other key relationships. Wow, isn't that a huge number? That's quite significant. So we got to keep an eye on that. The emotional stresses, we talked about the guilt, the resentfulness, which is caregivers' dirty little secret, right? So it's there. You got to pay attention. And patience, you need so much of it in this disease process. And the grieving part. Hold on one second. Yep, okay, just looking because I'm getting a notice here. All righty. So I'm going to skip this because, I think this is important. So if you're helping family members, 3 mantras help them with it. The disease is bigger than me, right? I'm going to tell you, because we can fight this, we can fight it. It's a monster. So you can't. The disease is bigger than me. Focus on what's left and not what's lost. I think this is huge, because I'm going to tell you, it's hard. This is what, I was talking to a friend who's a nurse the other day, and we were talking about this, and she knows my mother well. And I said, I feel so sad that I'm grieving because I feel that my mother is suffering. And what she said to me is, because of the disease and, kind of just being aware of her decline. And she's not aware always of her decline. And what the nurse friend said to me was, Mary, I think you're projecting your suffering onto your mother. I thought, ooh, isn't that something? Because it's the family members because when the person lacks the awareness, I think it's the family members that are really experiencing that. And I really took it to heart what she had said. But you know what? I don't want to spend so much time focus on what we've lost here that I'm not paying attention to what we have left. And that's important, because I feel like, you don't want to look back and say, I wish I had. And also, we Monday morning quarterback, don't we? I did what seemed, we can say, I should have done this. Well, look, maybe we didn't make the best decision at the time, but you know what? You did the best you could at the time. So it's important to do that. So Those suggestions to help with caring. Listen, families try to be a one-person activity committee. Yeah, you're not. You know what? People with Alzheimer's and other dementias, they get exhausted. So the best we can do is, have an activity or two. You got to give rest periods in between. We talked about, again, enrich what's left. Look for the moments of grace, right? Because they're there. The facility called me today, one of the activity person at the facility who's wonderful, and she FaceTimed my mother with me this morning. And my mother looked and she said, "Oh my gosh, look at that beautiful picture." She was looking through the phone at me. It was like, that's my moment of grace. That's my mother. And she goes, "That's mine. She's mine." And I was like, "Yes, I am yours. I am." And it's like, see what I mean? We have these moments of grace all the time. Let's not miss out on them. Using arts and music. Listen, people in the earlier stages, if they don't have healthcare proxies and stuff, get moving on it because we know where the disease is going. Forgive, 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 right? We kick ourselves as caregivers. No, forgive yourself, right? Guilt, recognize it, let it go. If somebody asks to help, say yes, it gets easier. Caregivers always say no, right? Break responsibilities into bite-sized chunks. It gets way too overwhelming. Don't ignore sleep and support groups. Being in the moment, get correct information about the disease, right? Because it's important. If people understand the disease better, I think they navigate the process better. Don't delay in getting help. It's a strength to get help, not a weakness. Take care of yourself. Eat well, sleep, exercise, do all that. Know the community resources out there. Go to your medical appointments. Take credit, not guilt. And accept changes. This doesn't mean it's okay. It's not okay with me that my mother was dealt this hand, but the reality is I need to accept the fact she was dealt this hand. This is what we're dealing with. And again, it can help you to come to some peace with it too. So just in terms of those resources, look at this. There are some: home care, adult day health, assisted livings, nursing homes, special, right? Alzheimer's special care units, the VA, support groups, education, meal delivery, respite care. I love my ASAPs, right? I mean, our elder care agencies are so important. Alzheimer's Association, they're available. They have a lot on caregivers, by the way, a lot. So if you're referring for family members, make sure they connect up with that. And they have things on other dementias too there. So geriatric care managers, hospice. It's so important to get a hospice involved. And Medical Alert, that's Alzheimer's Association. I need to write that out. So, it has a safe return. You've heard of the Amber Alert for children. There's a Silver Alert for older adults. And it's been, they've helped many a person. So I know that's a lot of information. If people are interested in the slides, I am happy to share my slides with people. So just email me, okay? When you send me the val back that you'd like a copy. Let me ask questions, comments.
Always a great presentation, Mary, as always.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
It's a pleasure. Well, listen, I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time out and coming out in the middle of your day like this and being a part of this. So really, thank you so much. And thanks for your engagement too. I love seeing you all. So when we sign off, if you can please make sure, let me just see, hold on, somebody's trying to communicate. Let me just make sure. Oh, thank you. So what you can do is send your evaluation back to me, and I'm going to send you your certificates, okay? And like I said, in that correspondence, if you want the slides, I'll send them to you. I hope you have the rest of your day goes well, and take care of yourselves, please.
You too, Mary.
Thank you.
Mary. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. reminder to people who are on by phone also to let me know who you are so that I can get your information to you, okay?